This week, we are beginning a new mini-sermon series entitled Daily Bread. We're embarking on what many preachers refer to as the John Gauntlet of bread texts. Because for the next 5 weeks, Pastor Mark and I are faced with 5 different gospel stories that all relate to bread. Now, don't get me wrong, I am a good Mediterranean girl who loves her some carbs, but preaching on them for 5 weeks in a row can be a little challenging, especially when you're trying to engage with fresh perspectives week after week. Because really, let's be honest, how much can one say about bread and Jesus without getting redundant? While we were planning our preaching schedule for the summer, we actually contemplated about completely punting on these texts and just doing something totally different, which lots and lots of preachers do. But while we were discussing our options, I actually remembered this idea that I saw many years ago that Bishop Mike put forward on his blog. I think it was like 9 years ago because I was in seminary at the time. And in these series of blog posts, Bishop Mike compared these bread texts to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are you guys familiar with this theory? Seeing a few nods and some people just sitting. Okay, so for those of you who are not, this theory was created by U.S. psychologist Abraham Maslow, who was frustrated with the current state of psychology at the time. He felt that his colleagues, like Freud, gave the sick side of psychology, and he wanted to present a healthier side. His parents were first-generation Russian Jewish immigrants, so he felt that he had learned fairly early the difference between wants and needs. And so his theory states that all humans have basic foundational needs that must be met before they can aspire to greater, higher, or more spiritual things. And he created this pyramid with physiological needs at its base and self-actualization at its peak. And in between, we find safety, love and belonging, and esteem. Maslow's theory was that we must first acquire the base level of physiological needs before we can gain anything else. Because if we don't have food and water or shelter, education, loving relationships, or spiritual enlightenment are kind of irrelevant. Each level builds upon the next, so if you haven't acquired one, you won't be able to progress to the next one. Bishop Mike's observation is that for the next 5 weeks, these bread texts take us along this journey of human advancement according to Maslow's pyramid. So that's the journey we're going to take. In today's text, we start with the base, which is physiological needs, the nourishment of bodies, physical nourishment of bodies. In our gospel, all these people have gathered near Jesus and the disciples in a kind of remote place along the Sea of Galilee. They're hoping to learn from them, or maybe witness some miracles or some healings because Jesus has been doing this. Maybe they're hoping that they themselves will experience a healing. But after all of their travels to get to this location, they're hungry and need food. And apparently they had planned rather poorly because no one brought any with them. Eventually, the disciples located a little boy who had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, which is obviously not enough to feed 5,000 people. As the scene progresses, a lot of commentators have noted that this seems to kind of foreshadow the Last Supper a little bit, because Jesus gives thanks, breaks the bread, and then has it distributed to the people. And the gospel tells us the people were able to eat as much as they wanted until they were satisfied. And then the leftovers are collected, and there is 12 baskets of food which remain. Jesus knew that before the people would be able to focus on their spiritual needs, before they could learn anything from him, before they could take in anything that he had to say, they first had to have their physical needs met. I think we can all, if we really think about it, relate to this a little bit. Y'all familiar with the term hangry? Anybody here ever experienced some hanger? Okay. I think some people are just not wanting to admit it. Thank you for those of you who did. Hanger is a real thing, just ask my husband. This is where you kind of like get so hungry you're a little angry, kind of aggressive and mean. Like maybe you can't even make decisions when you're hangry. When I reach this point, I can't even decide what I want to eat. I just know I need to eat. Yeah, I mean, I think probably a whole bunch of you are probably sitting here right now just thinking about the grilled cheese we're about to have. Let's be real. Not really paying attention because all you can think about is the Gruyere. I know. But in all seriousness, it's true, right? Like, when we reach a state that we're so hungry, we can't focus on anything else. And sometimes we can't make decisions, and we can't certainly learn anything, let alone, I don't know, have some sort of spiritual revolution. It's just not possible. That hunger and discomfort takes over everything, and that's all we can focus or concentrate on. For the first 6 years of my life, my family lived in a little tiny town outside of Salem, Oregon, called Almsville, Oregon. There is not much in Almsville, Oregon. There was even less in 1985. But the only thing that Almsville was known for then, and is still known for today, is the Almsville Corn Festival. This is the ad from their festival for this year. It's the 56th annual Almsville Corn Festival, so it's been going on for a minute. As I recall, there was like a parade, and then people would gather in the Mill Creek Park, which is not exactly a very large park. And there'd be some vendors and like one of those little pony ride things, you know, where there's like the 3 ponies that just sort of go around in a circle. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. And then, I don't know, like some carnival games. Small town charm at its finest. The main attraction of the Corn Festival are mounds and mounds and mounds and mounds of corn. And then, you know, it's all you can eat hot buttered corn on the cob. That's kind of awesome. Are you getting a picture of what Almsville is like? Great. First 6 years of my life, this is where I lived. So I don't know why I remember this, but I do. My older brother Gabe's first grade teacher, his first grade reading teacher, and then she was his second grade everything teacher. Her name was Mrs. Gardenheimer. Used to keep this large basket on a credenza behind her desk that had bananas and apples and like Ritz, the Ritz sandwich crackers that had like the cheese in them, and peanut butter and jelly and bread and like rice cakes and things like that. This big basket. My mom had a meeting with her one day. It was probably some sort of a parent-teacher conference. I'm not really sure. But she brought me along with her because I was too little to be left alone. I'm 2 years younger than Gabe. So this must have meant he was in first grade at the time, because if I was in kindergarten when he was in second grade, I would have been taken care of. So at the time, I was probably 4 or 5. And this made this big of an impression on me. At some point during this meeting, my mom asked about the basket of food and asked Mrs. Gardenheimer why she had that basket of food in her classroom. And Mrs. Gardenheimer responded something along the lines of, because this is a poor community, and a lot of my students come to school hungry. Their parents haven't or can't feed them breakfast, and hungry kids can't focus. They can't retain knowledge. Sometimes they can't even stay awake. I can't teach hungry kids. So I feed them, and then I teach them. It wasn't until I was a grown adult that it occurred to me that in the early 1980s, free breakfast wasn't a thing like it is now. I actually don't remember breakfast being served at any of my schools until like middle school. And in that town, public kindergarten wasn't a thing until much later. I went to kindergarten at a Baptist church. So if educating kids was barely a priority, feeding them certainly would not have been. Also, public school teachers in Almsville were not exactly living in the lap of luxury. I looked up the average teacher's salary in rural districts in the state of Oregon in 1985. And even though Mrs. Gardenheimer was an experienced teacher, she was likely making less than $16,000 a year. Yet, Mrs. Gardenheimer bought food every week to feed her students so that she could teach them, so that they could learn. Jesus knew what Mrs. Gardenheimer knew. Hungry people can't learn. So he addressed the physical needs of the people. In this morning's gospel, there is no profound teaching. There is no Sermon on the Mount. There are no parables. There are no healings. There is no casting out of a demon. There is just food. There is just the nourishing of bodies in preparation for what is to come next. Our first lesson was really similar. In that story, which almost foreshadowed our gospel, Elisha cared about hungry people and miraculously fed them in much the same way, nourishing their bodies for what was to come. Jesus cares about hungry people. God cares about hungry people. We are shown today that God cares about the physical comforts of God's people, about our physiological needs. So we should as well. Research has shown that there's enough food produced worldwide to feed all the people on the earth, yet famine and starvation and malnutrition still exist. Jesus had a solution for this problem, and that was to share. It's not a communist or a socialist approach. It's enoughist. Everyone doesn't get the same amount. They just get enough. I once read that we don't have a supply issue. We have a distribution issue. So then the big question is always, what do we do about this? What are we as passionate and faithful disciples who have been called and claimed through our baptism, who have been gifted and sent into the world, supposed to do about it? Well, to begin with, we can always pray. We can pray for those who are hungry in the world, both locally and globally. We can pray especially for hungry children, that their tummies will be filled so that they can have the ability to learn. And next, we can learn. We can educate ourselves about local and global hunger. If we need a starting point, ELCA World Hunger, our ministry partner, has some really amazing resources available on their website. It's as simple as going online and poking around. And I gotta say, if you guys waste as much time on Facebook and Instagram as I do, then you have some time to poke around on their website and learn about hunger issues. The more we know, the more we can do. And finally, if you have enough, then you can share. You can be like Mrs. Gardenheimer and feed hungry people so that their physiological needs are met. Donate your time, your money, and/or your food to those who need it. We collect food in our food barrels every week and take it monthly to Katy Christian Ministries. So maybe make contributing to that effort a priority. Make nourishing the bodies of our siblings in Christ who are food insecure a core value and central facet of your life as a disciple. I think, before I conclude, that it is important to say that sometimes people say things like, we need to take care of ourselves, or your body is a temple, or this is the only body you get, you can't grow another one. And it's usually to shame people for some perceived unhealthy life choice or body shape or something like that. That is not kind, it is not cool, and is certainly not helpful. It's just wrong. We should never ever shame ourselves or others for what our bodies look like. But we should take care of and nourish our physical bodies to the best of our abilities. This doesn't mean that anybody has to look like a Cosmo cover model. Let's be real, they're all photoshopped anyways. Doesn't mean anybody has to work out 24/7, because outside of Pastor Mark, nobody really enjoys running. It just means we have to do our best. Be ourselves, love yourself, and be as healthy as you can be. Nourishing our bodies and the bodies of others is important. It's foundational. It is the first step toward becoming better, more full, enriched, fulfilled followers of Jesus. It is the base upon which we build our discipleship pyramid. Amen.